best slide. But the nervous system is comprised of a brain, spinal cord, that's your central nervous system, and then you have the peripheral nerves that come out from the spine and go out to different parts of the body. I'll get you up here. Oh, I went too far. And this is kind of a pretty picture because it's kind of pretty. And it shoots, it covers, goes to different parts of the body. But it's like, in my mind, it's like wiring a house. You've got the energy, or you've got the computer system up here that goes through like these computer cables that go out to the end and do the things they're supposed to do. They not only create mobility, create motion, fire neurons, so you have a muscle that fires, but they receive the information back. They help regulate all sorts of body functions. It's a checks and balances. And these 11 systems have to work in what we call homeostasis, where if there's any subtle imbalance in between those systems, you end up with pathology or illness. It's not amazing that we're alive. It's not amazing that we die. It's amazing that we're alive. How we live with all the disease and all the injuries and everything in the world with such delicate parts, such intricate parts. There are more diseases than I know. And there's more ways of killing yourself than you know. We do it accidentally all the time because we don't know we're in danger half the time. But the brain, we have started to find out how delicate it is. We used to tell people, oh, he had a concussion, he'll be okay. Well, no, not anymore. Now concussions are a very big deal. We know that it is neurotrauma to the central nervous system, and it requires time for that to repair, and over time, repeated injury, repeated insult creates something that you can't get past. CTE is something they're continuing to study, especially in NFL, developing long-term brain damage because of got dinged too many times. This is part of the nervous system that's a little bit more confusing. This is more of a diagram. I won't look at the actual anatomy on this, but it gives you two different systems within the nervous system. The parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is the one that kicks in when you're at rest, when you're relaxed, when you're digesting your food at Thanksgiving. You're all parasympathetic. You're parasympathetic because you're digesting, so the blood, the information is saying, heart, slow down, lungs, slow down, stomach, kick it up a notch because we got to get this food moving. Let's get the pancreas going. The eye can, it can constrict. You're at rest. Parasympathetic, you're at rest. I'd like to know, because I always love a good joke. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. That's what kicks in when you get the adrenaline rush, all right? That's when the eye dilates, because what I'm running for my life, or I'm fighting for my life, I need to see everything I can. Heart rate comes up. Before you start to get active, it jumps. Your skin starts to get tingly. Your hair's up. Your muscles begin to loosen up. Your lungs start to breathe deep. Everything's increased, ready to go, and it's based on what? Response. Something triggered it. The eye dilates. Everything goes. These are two major systems that operate autonomically. They don't have you tell it what to do. You don't actively do this. It starts, and it's there to protect you. It's there to help you. It's there to keep you growing. And there's more to it than that, a lot more. But we're going through the gross anatomy here, folks. It's not because it's gross, Susan. It's because it's a lot, which is gross. Don't be worried. It's going to get worse. Dermatology. Pituitary gland, that's a unique little part of the brain. I wanted to bring it up because it's one part that is not just strictly one system. It's part of the brain because the posterior aspect is neurological. Right here, it runs off the brain. The anterior portion is the adenohypophysis. It's a gland. It's part of the endocrine system. They work in conjunction together to do different body functions. There's a loop mechanism. There's a stopgap mechanism. There's a way of maintaining balance in the body. And these things have to work together. They're not the only thing. It's just one thing. It's just one thing. It's one part of the brain. Blood-brain barrier. If you've ever heard of somebody having a bleed, that's because the blood got into the brain cavity or it's inside the meninges, which covers the brain. That's why you get pressure in the brain. But the blood carries with it a lot of things the brain should not be in contact with. So guess what? There's no blood in the brain. And guess what? The brain doesn't have any pain sensors. You can poke the brain, it doesn't hurt. It does things, but it doesn't hurt. It's not the pain generator. It interprets the pain. But in the body, we have endothelial cells that allow blood to get through to our organs and stuff. And I'm not sure this is the best. This is not the best one here. I don't think I have the one up here I want. But endothelial cells in your arteries are wide enough so that nutrients can pass through to get to the tissues. But the brain can't have that happening. So one mechanism is it tightens that up to where there isn't any room between those endothelial cells, and it prevents that from coming across. It also has other stopgap measures in place, which, to be honest with you, I need to go back and refresh because it's in depth, and I didn't have the time for it. But I wanted to mention, why do we have a blood-brain barrier? Yeah, I mean, that's our central nervous system. That goes down, we go down. There's some things you just can't live without. Brain can live without oxygen for how many minutes? Anybody know? 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Now, we often say, well, that guy was doing CPR for 15 minutes. What you don't know is there's oxygen in the blood. We're circulating to the brain. We're not getting in it. So we're still getting oxygen there for a little while. We're trying to extend the time to get the guys with the AED there. But the oxygen cannot be deprived of air for longer than 4 minutes or it dies. Okay. Cardiovascular. The cardiovascular system is something we probably all know about, but you see a whole, this is kind of neat looking. What am I? You got the pump, the heart, which is a complex thing in and of itself. And you notice you have specialists. When you go to the doctor, you get specialists. You want to know why? Because each unit in the body is so complex, they have to focus on it. Now, the problem is we're so specialized that sometimes nobody's overlooking the whole thing, and we make a lot of mistakes because somebody over here could have stopped something that should have happened over here, and we don't talk. But the cardiologist, he's more involved in heart health. The vascular surgeon is going to be more involved in the vasculature. The two ought to be talking, right? And you ought to be talking to the neurologist and whomever else is treating the whole person. The pump is unique. I watched a heart transplant on TV once, and it's an interesting thing. They take this heart out, and once they attach it, it tastes the blood and pumps. It tastes the blood and pumps. It's rare that they have to start the heart. Once that blood is let into the heart, it starts to go. It's trained. It's designed to pump blood. It has there's mechanisms in place that help it to move and do and pump it. But if you look at the arteries and the veins, can you tell by looking at this one which is an artery, which is a vein? Come on, anatomists. Reds are? Yeah. Blue are veins and arteries are red. Why? Because if your blood has oxygen, it turns red. It's blue when it's not. So your return path after you've dumped the oxygen off in the organs comes back through the blue path to the heart where it's pumped back out into the lungs to get oxygen and get rid of the CO2 and turn red again and go back out. Okay, so that's a lot of pressure for that heart. So there's a lot of things that are different about the vasculature, and I'm getting at something here because this is what we consider design. The arteries have a lot of elasticity to it. The arteries, as the heart pumps, the artery will expand and accommodate for that gulp of blood and then constrict and help push it down the line. It's designed to flex and contract like the heart to keep that blood moving. You don't get that same kind of a covering with the veins. The veins actually have gates. They're thinner walled, but they have gates. So as the blood starts to ooze past a gate, it closes so it can't backwash, can't go back, it can only go forward. And so as that less of a pressure pushes it through, it only goes one way. Kind of like the locks you would get maybe if you went through the Panama Canal. And it continues to build one side up. But that's still a lot. And so when you're at rest, it's not a big deal because your legs are up, you're laying down, you can get that gravity flow. What happens when you're moving and grooving? Or if you happen to run and you need lots of heart return, what moves the blood back? Can't do it. The muscles. Muscular contraction around the vein, that provides that compression to move it back. And Wolff's Law of the Heart tells us that if you increase the supply to the heart will beat harder. The heart will beat harder. It'll accommodate more, it'll beat harder, it'll move faster. So there's a little bit of a lag time when you start to run. You start to run, and a few seconds later, now my heart's kicking up, and it's trying to catch up. It's the physiology. It's how we're made. There's a design here. I'm not going to spend hardly any time on this because really this is about immune system, but it's something you ought to see. This is your lymphatic system. Part you probably don't know much about. This is where it attacks the system. There's a lot of white blood cells that are made in these areas that accumulate in areas where you might have a portal of entry, mouth, ears, and nose. You have areas where you have higher concentration of sweat glands, in other areas where you have another portal of entry with the anus and the genitals. They have to have a lot of concentration of lymphocytes and white blood cells to attack things that might find a way in. Like I said, it's amazing we're alive, but let's keep going. Respiratory system, I'm intimately acquainted with this one because I'm an asthmatic, and it's one of those things that I like to. And this is one of those things we kind of know what it is. It comes in through a major one, goes out to the end. Exchange oxygen for CO2. Oxygen for CO2. Doesn't operate on its own. It operates with the circulatory system. They used to call it cardiorespiratory. Now it's cardiovascular, respiratory, two different systems. You think they need each other? Think the brain needs it? Okay. By the way, of the 11 systems, 10 are essential. 10 are essential to life. Digestive, ew. We know what this does. It supplies all of our nutrients. It gives us our water. It's oftentimes how we get sick. Break down the food, break it down in the intestines, get it into the blood, get it to the ends of the body, nourish us. I won't harp on that too much. Kidneys, very interesting. They filter our blood to keep it clean. They help us maintain a certain pH in the body. They help regulate the volume of our blood, so our blood pressure is regulated by that. A lot of problems get caused by this. We have people with kidney problems, and that's how we lost my father-in-law. His kidneys failed, and my uncle within a month of that. But this is an area we don't talk a lot about unless you got a kidney stone, right? Then it's a very important system. Keep going. Endocrine system. This is the one that deals with hormones. This is like the system in my mind is almost ethereal. It's like, man, that's just, to me, it's like all these hormones going to all these places doing different biological functions governed by the cells themselves. And so this is designed for growth, development, reproduction, metabolism, works in conjunction with all the body. The naughty one, the reproductive system. Oh, I didn't put it. But it did that. How long do I let it awkward pause? I'm so naughty. I'm just like thinking, this will all be awkward together. It's not necessary for life, but it is necessary for continuation of our species, of our kind. Not necessary for life. Now, I looked at this. We kind of ran through gross anatomy together, all these big things, and here's a misquote. I'm going to admit it's a misquote. It was thought to be Aristotle, and it was somewhat his thought, but it was kind of taken out of context and reformed. But what I will say is it's been repeated time and time again, even in my chiropractic classes, and repeated in this way, which is not exactly how he intended it, although it's not completely wrong. And I just decided, what is it, if it's just Aristotle, we quote it, but if humanity has quoted it for 2,000 years and they've come up that this is something they believe, I can't quote it. So we're going to quote it, because I think when I was sitting in class, this struck me as a almost spiritual moment. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. 2 plus 2 equals more. Well, what does that mean? That means we haven't explained what the parts are. We don't know what all the parts are. Or our math's off. Or there's something here going on we haven't been able to explain. But when we start putting the systems together and you get a person, that's a little bit different than just a bunch of systems sustaining life. What's life? They don't agree. They have lots of definitions to it, but they include certain things like movement, reproduction, development. You have a lifespan where you're born and you die. There's an end and a beginning. And there are other thoughts that go into what life is. Movement, maybe, because we talk about the trees and stuff, and I suppose if you're watching them on an express lens where they're actually watching it grow, there's some movement during their growth, but the wind moves that. But we have things that we know are attached to life. It still doesn't explain what's sitting in this room with me. It still doesn't explain looking at them. This is one I put up here because, well, my daughter would love this. She's an eye person. This is one body part that if you just break the one body part down, you can see that you've got several different components to it. Optic nerve is over here. That's what but the eyeball is the sensory organ. How many knows what senses do we have? We have 5 senses. What are they? And what? Hearing. Yes, yes. So you got most of those here, except for the touch, right? Touch is out here, but you even touch with your face, so you got all of them up here. But the eye is an amazing thing. There was a scientist who went from atheism to belief by looking at the anatomy of the eye. It's beyond me. It's not my main deal. I do look at it some. You've got several ocular muscles that are extraocular. They move the eye in different directions. They have to coordinate movement. But up in here is this is a lot of the machinery here. You got your pupil. That's where the light comes in. You have your iris. If you look at an iris on a camera, that extends or it contracts, and that's what causes that pupil to either constrict or expand. Let more light in, let less light in. So it adjusts to light. It adjusts to, we talked about fight or flight. That will allow a certain amount of light in. The cornea, or the lens, excuse me, the lens right here is what focuses it. And there's muscles in there. You see these little muscles? See these little muscles here that will cause it to thin out or relax it so it gets thicker. And that's what helps focus it for not light, but for depth perception. So I can aim at something there. I can get I squint because we're trying to get that lens right. Sometimes those lenses get clogged and clouded, and you end up with your cataracts and you have to put a new lens in. This is kind of an interesting thing back in here. It's not very important. It's called a retina. It doesn't really matter much. That's where you see. That's what gives you sight. All of it gives you sight. You take the lens out, you're not going to see very well. Take the pupil out, you're not going to see very well. But the retina, I am intimately acquainted with it too because mine detached a couple years ago, and I lost sight for a day and a half or two in an eye. It's where the rods and cones are. Now, if you ask me, that looks like a carrot more than a cone, and I keep thinking of Bugs Bunny, but they have different, they do different things. The rods and the cones. One perceives the light when it's dimmer, another one perceives it when it's brighter. They have better peripheral vision or better acuity in the central vision. But they have different purposes. That's a cell that gets triggered and it fires a message back to the brain via the optic nerve for its interpretation of what you're seeing. Okay, I understand that. But still haven't really explained to me what sight is. I can point out the anatomy, but I'm not getting the whole picture, and we're still trying to figure it out. Here's a cell. Quick question. How many cells is in the human body? Oh. Whoa. Okay. How many zeros in a trillion? Huh? Come on, chemist. What? 12. So 1 trillion cells. 1 trillion is 10 to the 12. Okay? 10 to the 12. there's approximately, based on, and this is computation, nobody's ever sat down and counted them that I know of, but they've estimated for females as many as 28 trillion to males 36 trillion. Now, each one of these cells has different functions because you have skeletal. Oh, you got to be kidding me. Okay, you got several things within the cell. These are called organelles. Your body has organs. There are organelles within the cell. They do different things. They produce proteins. They create the cell it's supposed to be, whether it's muscular, skeletal, nervous system. They have different things. This little bad boy here, that's the mitochondria. That's your energy producer. You don't have anything operating without the energy in the cell. These cells are mini factories. They make stuff on a cellular level. How? Why? That's the center. That's your nucleus. See all these little things in here? That's your genetic material. At the core of that is DNA. We'll talk about that a different day, and that's way above my pay grade, but I'll try to conquer it. Deoxyribonucleic acid is something they discovered, and it's what codes us. So at the center of our cells is our coding, who we are, how we look, who we're going to be physically. What am I doing here? Why are we having this class, and what's all this about? There's a concept called irreducible complexity. And I took you through a lot of this to look at the gross anatomy, look at some of the body parts, look at the cellular level, and look at the detail that is there, the complexity that is there. That's not justice. That doesn't, what we went through does not do it justice. It's a 1-hour crash course. Here you go. You want something to blow your mind, go to medical school. Be a PhD in anatomy. Be a microbiologist. I don't know how they aren't all God believers, to be honest with you. That's my take, because it was more convincing than ever. The human body is composed of extremely complex microscopic machinery. We talked about that. Each part of the cell depends on the other part of the cell for it to function properly. To remove any one essential part, the cell dies. Hence, the cell is not just complex, it is irreducibly complex. What they're saying is if you take apart a mousetrap, any part of that, how does the mousetrap function? There are parts that have to simultaneously appear. They have to be in place together for them to function. You can't have the mousetrap without the spring or without the wood, whatever. It's got to have the catch. That's a simple example. How about we get complex and look at a Model T Ford? How many parts are, some of those are non-essential. You can drive without the headlights. You don't need the fenders. You don't probably need the horn. But there's some things in place that you can't get away from that have to be in place in order for it to function as a car, to drive. The question is this. That's something that's going to require intelligence to make. No car was made without some sort of intelligent input to design it. They had a purpose for it. They had details that were intentional. The human body is far more complex than anything on this planet. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I'll tell you, the most complex part of it is the brain and the neural. It blows my mind. But the inability to reduce this down to a form where it will function without all of its components, there is going to come a point where you can't. It has to, your cell, we looked at here, has so many parts there that are required for it to transcribe to create more proteins. You have to have not only the code, which is the DNA, that's your computer coding, but you have to have the hardware that can put it together. Who's transporting the information? Who's transporting it out? Who's deciding which part of the code is specific to this part of the body? Who's deciding the brain doesn't need a musculoskeletal cell in there somewhere? That happens, you got a problem, by the way. That's not a muscle. So the question then is, this concept of irreducible complexity, something to explore, is basically better understood when you look at the complexity, you look at the detail of the human body, and ask yourself, When I'm asked to give a defense for why I believe, is it rational? Is it reasonable? Is it reasonable to believe there's a designer behind all this? All this. All this. And I'm doing a real quick job here, folks. Even the skin impresses me. And I think when it comes to, our convictions, and not a requirement to prove, just a reason to believe. Why do you hope? Or what's your hope? Why do you hope? Is it rational? I think we need to have some skin in the game. Yeah. Well, I'm willing to talk to you more later if there's any questions you have. We're going to do another one later on in November. It's going to tap into some things like genes, DNA, and even consciousness, which I'm telling you, that one scares me more than anything. But thank you for being a good part of the class. Yes, Laura Lee.
I was marveling at the universe. How far is it? Is there an end to it? Blah, blah, blah. How big is it? And somebody said, well, we don't know. But also, if you turn inward, there's like a whole, it's just as expansive and complicated. There's a whole thing inside here.
No. Well, I've always found it interesting that the diagram of an atom reminds me of a solar system. Yeah? It looks like, you've got your planets and your orbits, and it's like, you know what? Maybe some patterns that we, can look at. Coinkydinks. I think we're supposed to close now, so I will let you free, and you can go to the bathroom. Yes.
What about being red and blue? Always shades.
Well, I have blue in the vein.